The bridge. Gazing about the church, I felt worthless. The flowers had a lovely appearance. The ornaments were exquisite. The hall's architecture was magnificent. Every aspect of the wedding had been meticulously planned, and I had absolutely no involvement whatsoever. It was absurd. It was quite embarrassing. I cannot recall having attended a wedding when the mother of the bride was not informed at all about the arrangements. The bridegroom had completed every task. How on earth did he accomplish that? His parents didn't have much money, and they didn't support him. Though a touch dull, Tommy is a truly sweet kid. That's Candace's problem. If I did give her advice, I doubt she would heed it. I have, at best, a very rocky relationship with my daughter, and it won't get any better today. For the past 3 years, Candace has blamed me for her father's absence from her life. She's almost as mad at him as she is at me, which is the only thing that makes the situation bearable. I believe that we both secretly desire the same thing. Sam Hill should just saunter into this church and fix everything, as we both hope. Every girl wants her father to propose to her at her wedding, which is why she wants Sam to return. Sam needs to return so that I can escape my awful life. And I have something prepared for him that will improve my life in any case if he is unable to do it. I'm in awe of the place cards and seat markings' exquisite craftsmanship. They are breathtakingly gorgeous. I still don't know how Tommy managed to pay for all of this. Clearly, my prospective son-in-law has already achieved greater achievement than his parents. Perhaps I could ask him for a loan. There's basically no likelihood of that, which makes me giggle. Tommy doesn't say much to me. Yes, he is really courteous when we're stuck in the same room and he has to talk to me, but it seems to me that he avoids me as if I were a sexually transmitted disease that might be spread by simply looking at him. I swear, after we spoke, I saw the boy wash his hands. Regardless, Tommy appears to be deriving the funds for all of this from his partnership in that internet company. Tommy only ever wears jeans, t-shirts, and a 6 running shoes, so I'm sure he also hired a wedding planner. He's not fashionable at all. One of Candace's bridesmaids, Lupita, arrives to check everything and make sure it's perfect as the ushers open the doors. She must not see me doing the exact same thing here, I suppose. I would have told the foolish girl if she had just asked. But the majority of these idiots have stopped talking to me, so I keep forgetting. It irritates me to see Lupita wearing that outfit. Somehow, Tommy and Candace wound up shelling out about $1,000 apiece for their bridesmaid outfits. The majority of those girls will wear the outfits a lot because they are so lovely. They have a great appearance. And here I am, the bride's mother, sporting a Kmart off-the-rack dress. My dress doesn't fit right and isn't fitted. There are numerous ruffles that protrude at strange angles. I detest this outfit. However, that was all I could afford. I had really considered just asking Tommy to purchase me a dress, but once more, as a Satanist, speaking with Tommy was like scheduling a meeting with the Pope. I made every effort. I attempted nuance. Candace ignored my repeated questions about who had purchased the bridesmaids' gowns. I made an attempt to show her the images of the dresses I loved. Usually, all she would do was nod and tell me if she liked them or not. The doors were now open, and a large number of individuals were entering. The majority of them were gorgeous, and here I was, forced to wear this terrible garment. I was once again blaming Sam Hill for my current situation. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed one of the women pointing at me as I turned to see how my daughter looked in her $5,000 wedding dress. Her smile vanished as I turned to face her. It was filling in well on the groom's side of the church. On the bride's side, there were a few dispersed individuals. Tommy's parents entered and took a quick look around. His mother gave him a grin and a head nod. A tear streamed down her cheek as her spouse gave her a hug. To avoid smearing her makeup, she rubbed her face lightly. That woman was someone I detested. Then I became aware of it. Tommy's father limped around. Since her deadbeat deserter of a father could not be located or bothered to attend his own daughter's wedding, he was supposed to be the one leading Candace down the aisle. I was terribly disappointed because I thought the guy would be here. Alright, so I would only need to bide my time till Tommy hits Candace. Sam would undoubtedly attend the birth of his first grandson. There was a bit of a stir just prior to the ceremony beginning. Tommy had chosen that Candace should be escorted down the aisle by an uncle who had recently arrived, presumably because his dad was not well. Tommy and Candace were talking about it so loudly that I could hear them talking as soon as I walked behind the stage area. Tradition be damned. Tommy, honey, one of my mother's brothers can give me away, Candace replied. Tommy answered, no, Candy, it has to be my Uncle Santino. Trust me, honey, you'll be glad. What difference does it really make who walks me down the aisle? She inquired. I was about to intervene and try to assist them in resolving the issue. Please, honey, he pleaded. My daughter dissolved as well. His eyes brightened as she nodded her head. She retreated when he attempted a kiss. After the wedding, she replied. We're going to be doing a lot more than kissing after the wedding, he stated. She sent him a sly smile and said, we did a lot more than kiss last night. I was obviously not needed here either. There was a photographer shooting shots as I returned to the actual church. When I returned, he had just wrapped up taking pictures of the area where I was seated. I gave him a little touch on the shoulder as he and his helper went on to the next portion. I'm sitting there, I said, gesturing to my area. All right, he nodded. Then he turned to return to his destination. "Hey, I'm the mother of the bride," I responded. With a groan, he turned back to face me. "Then you should have been in some of the pictures we took," he replied. It stunned me. I took a seat in my chair and waited for the photographer to turn to face me again. It wasn't that big of a deal. They would spend the entire day taking photos. At the reception, they'd undoubtedly take hundreds. There was some disturbance from the groom's side. I saw a man with a beard enter the church. I would have given anything to wear that dress only once on the woman who accompanied him. It was a stunning tint of green seafoam. All the men in the chapel stared at her as it was shaped to fit her physique. She was curvaceous but thin. Her face was lined, and her eyes seemed to glitter. Her face had the creases left by a lifetime of laughter. Rather than taking away from her beauty, they enhanced it. Her figure may have belonged to a 30-year-old, but she had to be at least 50. You also couldn't really identify her age from the look on her face. I was terribly annoyed by her hair. Her stylist must have been an artist. She had layers of Inkai black under a really natural gray in her pixie cut, which somehow made it prettier than either would have been on its own. While his wife, date, or whatever she was sat down next to Tommy's parents and struck up a conversation with them, the bearded man was giving everyone hugs. The bridesmaids arranged themselves while the organist warmed up. My daughter was visible when I turned to face the church's corner. From my seat, I was able to see her, but not the majority of the audience. She had a stunning appearance. I so hoped her father could have been present to witness this, just for once. It was then that I observed her facial expression. Tommy had gotten what she wanted, but she wasn't pleased that a stranger had given her away. I saw a shift in Candace's demeanor as she walked down the aisle and the organist performed the wedding march. It seems that my daughter made the decision that the significance of her wedding day outweighed the specifics. She smiled broadly as she took the bearded man's hand in hers. Everything proceeded smoothly after that. It was not a customary ceremony. They simply uttered their vows, stood in front of the pastor, and proceeded down the aisle. Neither the bride's father nor mother had a role to perform. I believe Sam's conceit led to the removal of those items from the ceremony. I saw that Tommy's uncle, the bearded man, had tears in his eyes as they exchanged vows. The bearded man had a certain something that made the hair on the back of my neck rise up. I began to wonder why he would get so worked up over marrying a girl he was just getting to know for the first time. On the tip of my tongue, there it was. It was the gnawing sensation that appears right before you recall anything or someone. Horribly, the vows were over and the couple began to make their way back down the aisle just before recognition fired. When I looked up, I saw that everyone was getting up to set up for the bouquet toss and that the photographers were snapping shots. My daughter faced away from the throng and threw the bouquet over her head, landing it in the bearded man's companion's lap instead of in the hands of one of the excitedly pursuing young ladies. When it fell, she was giggling and conversing with Tommy's parents. Her response just made me more upset. Glancing at the bouquet, she chuckled, shook her head mournfully, and tossed it to the younger women. Although I'm not an expert in body language, it was obvious how she felt. She was aware that marriage wasn't in her future, but she still desired to be married. Maybe the bearded guy she was dating didn't want to get married. There were plenty of guys who preferred not to press the trigger. Most of them struggled with commitment. I was way too familiar with that. I went outside the church and watched as my daughter and new son-in-law were doused with rice as they made their way out of the building to board the waiting limousine. My friend Ralph, who had been here in case I needed him to do something for me, gave me a lift to the reception. Everyone had a terrific time eating and dancing at the reception. The cuisine was amazing. As I previously mentioned, Tommy had blown a huge sum of money on the nuptials. Most likely, he would have to pay for it for a very long time. On the one hand, I was relieved that he had spent every penny necessary to guarantee my daughter's special day would be just that, special. However, considering how long they would have to pay for it, I questioned whether it was worthwhile. Following the bride and groom's dance, Tommy's parents performed a dance alongside the bearded man and his companion. That was supposed to be for the happy couple's parents. As we had never met, I guess I didn't expect the bearded guy to find me, even though I was meant to dance with him. It would have been good to have been included, though. Things started to happen then, as all the other couples got up to dance and the reception evolved from a formal event to a celebration. Ralph approached me and grinned. For an instant, I believed he was approaching me to propose a dance. "Linda, it looks like I don't have to do anything," he replied. "But we still have a deal, right?" "Yes, Ralph," I replied. "We still have a deal. I don't suppose you want to dance, do you?" He admitted, "I'm not a very good dancer." Then he grinned and left. Another guy approached me right after he left. He appeared to be checking to make sure no one saw us together as he was scanning the area. "Hi Linda, I heard that you worked the late shift at the 7-Eleven, he said in his opening statement. Regretfully, his timing was terrible. A few women who he couldn't see had stepped closer to us as he was speaking to me. They both cast a sidelong glance at me. Simultaneously, I observed Ralph dancing on the dance floor, attempting to bring back the 70s style with a woman I had never seen before. My dress plastic began to disintegrate from my intense anger. It happened right then and there while I was searching for somewhere to hide. My daughter was dancing with the bearded man, and I observed that. With her arms wrapped around him, she was beaming with happiness. He, too, was grinning down at her. I began to wonder what he may have said to bring her such joy. She was embarrassed to be dancing with another man so intimately in front of her new spouse. I then looked into his eyes. They resembled hers completely. Back then, everything made sense. "Ralph," I let forth my loudest scream. "It's Sam, arrest him." With a foolish glance around him, Ralph shrugged his shoulders. With a universal "I don't know what the hell you're talking about" gesture, he raised his hands. I gestured to the man with a beard who gave my daughter a kiss before taking off sprinting. Ralph followed Sam, who was sprinting toward the back of the hall rather than the entrance. It eluded me to solve. Unless he meant to go up the stairs and out a second-floor window, there were no escapes that way. His date seems eager to leave the disturbance behind. She made her way to the door. I might chat to Sam about his choices of ladies to take my place while he was incarcerated. For whatever reason, the majority of the throng appeared to give way to Sam. They appeared to be making every effort to prevent or hinder Ralph as well. Then I noticed that Sam was heading back in my direction, toward the door leading to freedom. Sam was becoming closer to Ralph as well. Even though Sam is 52 years old, he was in good form. He is 1 year my senior. Was he truly under the impression that he could outpace a man 10 years his junior? The supply closet door abruptly opened as Sam was walking by it with Ralph following closely after. The force of the blow knocked Ralph off his feet. He hit the ground hard, losing all of his breath, and laid there. Sam was at the curb when I turned to check where he was. The snarl came from outside. The noise level exceeded the cacophony of the inside of the structure. Sam's vehicle arrived next to him. The car took off as if it were driven by a jet when he leaped in from the driver's side. Sam had a unique automobile. It would never have lasted past the point Sam reached the freeway. I had no idea what to do. My degrees of annoyance and rage had swiftly escalated. I was so furious that I lost track of where I was and everyone else who was staring at me and making fun of Ralph. I let out a loud cry of exclamation. I immediately sat down at the closest table after breaking down in tears. After what Sam had done to me, I had to endure 3 long years of being angry, sad, regretful, and experiencing 100 other feelings. I had at last the opportunity to make that guy pay, and he simply escaped my goddamn grasp. It was simply excessive. Tommy's father saw my plight and seized my upper arm and elbow. "Come on, Linda," he urged. "Let me take you somewhere that all of these people won't be staring at you." I gave a nod, and he guided me up the corridor. As we worked our way through the crowd, I heard a lot of tee-hees and a few sincere laughs. We made our way to a room on the hall's second floor. He vanished swiftly, and at first I assumed it was because he didn't want to be photographed with me. But after a few minutes, he returned with 3 glasses and a decent bottle of scotch. He brought his wife along, of course. As we were getting our drinks started, I heard a siren and looked out the window to see an ambulance. They were excellent people, and I was grateful for what they were doing for me. Tommy's father explained, "It's for Ralph. He's kind of out of it." "Are you aware?" I questioned him. He ran straight into a metal door, but I didn't think he got hit that hard, he claimed. He somewhat put himself through it. "That wasn't my intention," I clarified. "Were you aware that my spouse would be attending the nuptials?" He could not look at me, and neither could his wife. "Yeah, I knew," he replied. "Crap, most people here knew." "Who, Linda, do you suppose is paying for all of this nonsense?" "I suppose I should apologize to you for not telling you or for taking part in the deception, but if I did that, I wouldn't be telling the truth. Candace has been saying the same thing to Linda for months now. I wish my daddy could be at my wedding. Linda, the only thing stopping him from being here was you. He found a way to make his little girl happy one more time, and I don't think he regrets a second of it. So yeah, I knew, my wife knew, Tommy knew too. Maybe a few other people around town were in on it as well. Candace didn't know, so don't blame her. That was Sam's idea. He didn't want to put Candy in a position to have to lie to you or pick sides, so she didn't know. What I'd like to know myself is what caused all of this. I mean, everyone knows the stories and the rumors, but only 3 or 4 years ago, I remember going to barbecues at your house and you guys were just like every other couple in town. The next thing I heard was that Sam had run out on you. Some people say that he left you for another woman. The woman he was with here tonight is pretty enough that a lot of guys would leave their wives for her. But Sam just doesn't seem to be that type. And since he left, we've been hearing some stuff about you that isn't very good. I chalked it all up to you going a little crazy over your marriage going down the tube. What exactly happened between you two? The local police chief intervened as soon as the door opened, before I could say anything else. He also didn't appear to be particularly joyful. He looked at me and said, "Linda, I need to ask you some questions." Big as life and twice as serious, he entered the room with a gun strapped to his hip. Behind him in the hallway was Tommy. His suit was still on. His tie was loose and hanging there. I wasn't shocked to see Candace force her way into the tiny room, look around, and then settle down on Tommy's lap because she knew that he wouldn't be departing on their honeymoon until the next morning. She said, "What's going on?" "Hey Candy," Buck uttered. "I really hate to intrude on your special day, but we have a couple of little things to look into." I simply sensed like I was in danger in some way. And once again, I knew it was all Sam's fault. "Linda, I have a deputy downstairs with a broken nose, a sprained wrist, and a possible lacerated spleen. The EMTs tell me that they need to transport him to the hospital to verify the spleen, but Dave has seen enough of them both working as an EMT and over in Iraq where he got his training to be pretty sure. How the hell does that happen to a trained law enforcement officer at a wedding? He inquired. I questioned. How the hell should I know? Everyone saw it. He ran into a door. It was an accident. Or maybe just bad luck. Buck, maybe he was just clumsy. Buck questioned. Linda, is that your last word on this? Yes, it is, I responded. Everyone here can vouch for me. I was halfway across the room when it happened. I wasn't involved in any way, shape, or form with what happened to Ralph. He said, thank you, Linda. That wasn't so hard, was it? Candy, you and Tommy enjoy your life together. Wait, that isn't really the right thing to say. The two of you have been together for so long already. I guess I meant to say enjoy your honeymoon. You guys are going on cruise of the Caribbean, aren't you? Yes, my daughter answered, grinning and taking Tommy by the arm. Buck remarked, crap, you guys are lucky. When Susie and me got married, we crossed the state line and drove up into Michigan for our honeymoon. We went to Detroit. The way he pronounced Detroit had me laughing close to tears. I couldn't have laughed for very long, though. All right, Linda, he said. Let's leave these newlyweds alone and start taking care of business. I have to get back to Susie after I drop you off. Where do you drop me off? I inquired. He said, Linda, I spoke to Ralph. I know everything. I'm taking you to jail. My jaw sprang open in disbelief. I cried, Buck, you can't be serious. What are the charges? This is all Sam's goddamn fault. You should be arresting him, not me. These are very serious charges, Linda. I can't let you off this time, and I'm going to have hell to pay with my wife, Sarah, when I suspend her little brother Ralph without pay. I really ought to be firing him. Linda, you coerced a licensed law enforcement officer into conducting an illegal investigation for the purpose of personal gain. You had him try to trap an individual for whom there is currently no warrant issued or interest in by this jurisdiction. That constitutes harassment and entrapment. A law enforcement official was injured during this illegal operation. Lastly, you attempted to use bonding to pay off said law enforcement official. That's basically prostitution, which I've warned you about several times. Since Sam fled and abandoned me, I have no money, said Buck. I sighed. This is all Sam's fault. I have to make the best of what I have. What role does Sam have in any of this? Questioned Buck. Well, Ralph was chasing Sam when he slammed into that metal door, I replied. In the first place, why in the world was Ralph pursuing Sam? Questioned Buck. Speaking slowly, I hired him too. You mean to say that the price is the promise of bonding? Buck inquired, and I nodded. Mum, angrily hissed my daughter. Candy, he ran out on us and left us destitute and... I said, that isn't true, Tommy shot back angrily. He paid for Candace to complete her education. Even her bed and board were covered by him. Yes, but Tommy, you've covered all of her other costs already. You took money out of your company to buy her a car and to cover all of her bills ever since she moved in with you, I retorted. Hell, you even had your own wedding paid for. You're incredibly talented. Tommy corrected him, saying, that's not really true either. I don't exactly control the internet business. It is incorporated in a state that is distinct. All of the computer work is done by me. Basically, I upload stuff and administer the website. I just deal with client complaints and server problems. So, where is the source of all the money? Candace inquired. That's when everyone in the room turned to look at Tommy, myself, Tommy's parents, even Buck, though I had the strong feeling that Buck understood what was going on. Tommy started, Candy, I love you. I'm sorry I lied to you, but I promised. I just consented because I would have carried it out anyhow. However, in this manner I could have given you, and both of us, a better life. Candace responded, spill it, Thomas, in that tone that wives always use to compel their husbands to tell the truth. Your father owns the company, Candy. I only assist with running it. You've been receiving attention from him. Your father made me swear I would take care of you right before he departed. Your mom made him leave even though he didn't want to, Tommy remarked. Yes, Tommy, I cried angrily. He turned on me because he brought that young flake to the nuptials. 3.5 years ago, they fled away together, and he left his wife and children behind for her. Like many men, he lost sight of his obligations after becoming enamored with a young woman. No, madam, I love your daughter, Tommy uttered. I also hold you in high regard. However, that is completely untrue. Sam was never one to want to go. He was sobbing a little that he had to part with Candace. Furthermore, Caroline wasn't introduced to him until over a year after he left. Caroline is quite attractive aside from that. We've spoke quite a bit. However, this was only my second encounter with her in person. But I am aware that she is not just any young woman. She may not look it, but she is actually older than you. I cried out, it doesn't matter how old that dirty woman is, she still took my husband. She continues to reside with a married man. It's likely that he misled her about being married. Why don't you just start from the beginning so we can sort this whole pile of crap out? Linda, replied Buck. Maybe we should all know all of the facts here before we proceed. Okay, I replied. That's a really good idea. As everyone is aware, Sam and I have been married for 25 years this December. Additionally, Linda, Sam has been gone for 3 years, Buck yelled, glaring at me angrily. You can't surely be counting the past 3 years as. Yes, I can, I yelled. We're still legally married but before to his departure, didn't he file for divorce? Again questioned Buck. Can I share my goddamn story or not? Our divorce was never legally completed and he actually withdrew the petition, I remarked. They all nodded as I glanced from face to face, so I resumed. I married Sam 25 years ago. Is it acceptable? Both of us were in our mid-20s. I was really bashful, and Sam was a pretty popular person. Sam had already graduated from college and was doing well for himself as an industrial sales representative, essentially working for a company that marketed machine tools, presses, and tool and die technology. And don't ask me anything more about it, please, as I have no understanding what a tool is or what needs to happen for anything to be a press. Over the years, he made numerous attempts to clarify things to me. However, my curiosity in it was insufficient for me to comprehend it. Let's just say that Sam was an extremely successful businessman. I was able to become a stay-at-home wife and drop out of college a second time because husband made enough money. Like most young couples, we were disproportionately interested in connecting in the early years of our marriage. Sammy was my first, and I believe that played a significant role in that. I therefore had very little experience when we first started dating. However, during our first year of marriage, we experimented, albeit at a speed that now seems glacial to me. Please understand that I wasn't foolish. At first, it was just something I had to let him do to me, even though I knew exactly how to do it and what to do. In order to prevent my husband from going to some nasty lady, my mother had warned me that once I got married, I would have to let him put his thing in me. She warned me that if guys didn't do it, they would go insane. She went on to tell me about her near loss of my father. After my brother and I were born, she had ceased to share a bed with him. My father had begun to mistreat his secretary. Mom received the surprise of her life when she confronted Dad after learning the truth. Dad moved out, gave her some cash, and said they would figure out a timetable for when he could visit his kids. They reconciled ultimately, albeit it took some time. I really think that a number of factors were involved. My dad was sick of sleeping with his secretary and missed spending time with his children every day. Their marriage had been spared because of that. Whether I liked it or not, my mother advised me to frequently get on my back and spread him if I wanted my marriage to endure. I had no trouble with that. After getting married for 6 months, I was a dick-seeking missile. I became pregnant less than a year after we were married. I think Candace would have 8 or 9 siblings if the delivery problems had not prevented me from having any more children. We didn't slow down either, Candace. If anything, her presence increased our desire for one another. We used to have to wait for her to go asleep when she was a newborn. When she was older, we had to keep quiet around her, even when she was sleeping, because there was a greater chance that she would hear us and come in on us. Then, in order to provide her with unbroken time with us during her preteen and teenage years, we had to locate clubs, activities, and sleepovers with friends. I really did enjoy those sleepovers. We didn't need to conceal anything as Candy grew older and the years passed. Sam remained cheerful, but I began to question whether there were any other experiences that I was missing. A new couple, Glenn and Sue Campbell, arrived into the neighborhood. He worked for the county as a lineman. She also prepared unique soups for a nearby eatery. She was, I believe, somewhat well known for them. But to tell the truth, I was unaware of Campbell's soup. Most likely, it's a large city designer item. Over the years, Sue and I grew closer, and I began to see patterns in their marriage. Sue had cheated, as had Glenn. Sue made Glenn pay for doing it first, but they stayed together nonetheless. Sue was next in line. I was sufficiently stunned when Glenn pulled it off. However, because I'd witnessed my father do it, it wasn't quite as shocking when a male did it. But it was like dealing with aliens for Sue to not only cheat on her husband but to love it as well. What was even more startling was Sue's continued behavior. She began to look to me like one of those aliens. At last, I questioned her about it. She informed me that she had begun primarily to exact revenge on Glenn for what he had done, but that she had soon found it to be thrilling and enjoyable. For almost 20 years I've only had slept with Glenn, she stated. It was kind of the same old, you know. But don't you love your husband? I responded. I love him, of course, she exclaimed, startled. She gave me a look as though I was the one who was blind to the obvious. Linda, humans need a little change or some variety every once in a while. It keeps us sane. This has nothing to do with love. This is just bonding. You know how men are, if you give them what they want too easily, they get bored and they don't put forth any effort. That's partially why they're always looking for a new woman. But if you make it more challenging, they want you more. After all, you're the one they married. But we have the right to have a little bit of excitement too. And sometimes, even when you have steak at home, a hamburger is just good. Sue's infidelity was a secret that Glenn was unaware of. Simply put, women are better at hiding things. It was all out war when Sue caught Glenn the second time. She filed for divorce and kicked him out of the house. She wanted to intimidate him, even though she never planned to follow through on it. The problem was, she was the one who was startled. Glenn, like my father, concluded that perhaps he could make more money with his new partner. Glenn did not have children at home, in contrast to my father. Sue came up with the concept of a trial separation because she didn't truly want to lose Glenn. They would simply take a break of 90 days and get together again to talk about their future. That was her statement in the attorney's office. That was not at all what she told me. She sincerely hoped to give him a few months to become tired of sleeping with his new girlfriend. She thought he would grow to miss Sue if he could spend as much time as he wanted with her. After all, the fact that an affair is banned contributes significantly to its attractiveness. Sneaking about and getting to know new people is a thrilling experience. However, when everything is visible, it becomes routine or even dull. Glenn and his new girlfriend moved into an apartment after he left the house. During the first week of our separation, I had visits with Sue, and it had an effect on me. I simply felt as though I was living my life on a treadmill, and that every day was the same. Conversely, Sue's life was a never-ending cycle of novel experiences. It took me back to the early days of my marriage to Sam, when we were still figuring out how to bond. Sue said, "You ought to come along and do it with me. Tell Sam that you just need to take some time off to find yourself." Women our age, just before the change, they do it all the time. Telling her I couldn't, however, I was considering it. And it did occur that afternoon. While I was in Sue's house, her phone rang. She instructed me to disappear into one of the guest rooms upstairs. A young man, barely 20 years old, appeared at the door a short while later. He entered and spent a few minutes chit-chatting with Sue. To be able to hear them, I kept the door ajar. Before long, I heard Sue's voice. That evening when I arrived home, I was grumpy. I kept trying to get into a fight with Sam, but he was so gracious about it that all I could do was gently back down. At last, I just informed him that I wanted some alone time. "Okay, I'll go out to the garage and wash my car," he replied. He was just not getting it. "Sam, I'm going to move out for a while," I replied. The expression on his face broke my heart. Even though Sam is one of the strongest men I've ever met, it seemed like he was about to cry. Everything he was doing was incorrect. He was meant to just respond with a fine, just like my dad and Glenn had. I nearly changed my mind, but I reasoned that I'd done him enough harm already. I would have hurt him in vain if I hadn't followed through. When I informed Sue about it, she responded, "Wait until the two of you make up. It'll be like a second honeymoon." "We've already had a second honeymoon," I replied. "He took me to Hawaii. It will be around a third," she added. "We went to the Bahamas and renewed our wedding vows for our third honeymoon," I replied. At that moment, she merely gave me a weird look. Anyway, I didn't last the whole 3 months, but then neither did Sue and Glenn. They ended up getting back together after about 6 weeks. Sue had given my story about Sam and I renewing our wedding vows a lot of thought. She and Glenn had both gotten their fill of strange bonding and decided to truly give their marriage a second chance. They had a big party and renewed their vows in front of a lot of their friends. I invited Sam to come as our first date since the separation and intended to suppose him by moving back home afterwards. The 5 weeks that Sam and I had been apart had been interesting. I'm not going to lie, I did some things that I'm not proud of, but all it seemed to do was to confirm for me that Sam was the man that I was supposed to spend the rest of my life with. I learned so many things during those 5 weeks that I guess I should have known from the beginning. One of those things was that Sam was a gem. He really and truly loved me very deeply, and he showed it. As I told Sue about the things he did for me on a regular basis, even she was surprised. I think she got the idea during the first weeks of our separation when Sam was always showing up to try to talk to me or to bring me things. Unfortunately, Sam's timing was off. During those first few weeks, I was overwhelmed with new experiences, and that's when I started doing those things that even now I regret. But once the novelty wore off and I was ready to move back home, Sam had stopped coming by. He'd even stopped calling, and I started to worry. I think during those first few weeks Sam really had the idea that he'd done something wrong or that it was his fault that we were apart. Sue responded, "He's probably met someone." "What are you trying to say?" I inquired. "Well, honey, he is aware of your activities. Thus, it's possible that he chose to go obtain some for himself," she remarked. I was taken aback. I felt I was having a heart attack since my heart was thumping so quickly. There was no response when I contacted the house. I arrived at the house just as Sam was getting into his vehicle. I went with him. He visited the park close to our residence. He exited the vehicle and went for a jog. Although Sam had run cross-country in college, he had not done so since. I observed him for several days. To the best of my knowledge, he was single, but he was distinct. "That's a good sign," Sue replied. "He's trying to get into better shape to try to win you back." I tried to call him multiple times a day for the next few days. He never answered the phone or came back to any of my messages. When I attempted to reach him at work, his secretary consistently informed me that he was not in the office and would not return that day. In the 6 years since he was promoted to sales manager and then regional manager, Sam has not gone out to make sales or meet with clients. That woman was lying, and I knew it. Then it occurred to me that perhaps Sam was taking advantage of her. It appeared to follow the pattern. Sue merely smiled and said, "Honey, why would he desire her if he didn't want to screw me?" "May I ask?" she inquired. "What on earth are you discussing?" I inquired. The other night when he came over, she murmured. "Just tell me," I yelled. "Linda, I was trying to help you." "Jesus," she continued. "The guy with the flowers came over here looking like a puppy dog. It was really charming. Then he entered and noticed you. He was crushed, Linda. I flashed the poor man because I wanted to do everything in my power to cheer him up. You know that most guys will quickly go for a revenge bonding, especially if they're angry that their girl is seeing another guy. I was going to blow his mind, but instead he just went off. He hasn't returned since then. Have you two not discussed it when he calls? I informed her. He hasn't called. You simply need to be prepared for him. In a few weeks, the two of you will be back together and better than ever, you'll see. Don't worry, honey, he's just hurt and upset. He probably needs to think things through before he contacts you. I hoped that she'd be right. Everything happened so quickly then. I began to have some medical problems and I began to realize that for the first time in my life I was on my own. And I didn't like it. Sue couldn't find the time to go to the doctor with me. Sam would have taken the day off from work to be with me normally. In this case though, there was no way that I would even consider asking him to go. At the same time, Glenn and Sue had gotten back into contact. They were having a series of long loud arguments that Sue told me were good. Then they met to talk about the things they were angry about in person. They ended up sleeping together. Neither of them even cared that I was in the house. Once they got back together, they continued talking and working their way through things. Glenn admitted to all of the women that he cheated with and promised not to ever do it again. They talked about why he cheated and agreed to talk before they ever got into that situation again. Sue admitted to less than half of the things that she'd done. She later told me that it's far easier for a woman to go out and find a man to have slept with than it is for a man to. She also reminded me that what Glenn had done was far worse. She'd had a bunch of non-emotional bonding with some nameless men. She wouldn't remember most of them if they stood in front of her. Not a single one of them was a danger to her marriage. Glenn, on the other hand, had been involved in 2 long-term affairs with women who had set out to replace her in his life, and he had allowed it. Both of those women had been younger and prettier than she is. He had spent time with them. He had dated them. He had moved in with one of those women. The worst part is that Sue knew the woman. She worked in a store that Sue shopped in all the time. Every time that Sue went there, the woman just smiled at her. My comment: you will see what happens to OP with his cheating wife. Will he take her back? Or will he really kick her out? Find out in the part 2 ending today. Hope you like this so far, and I will finish the ending very quick.